Dr. Sarasu coordinates a number of research projects on human rights, reproductive rights, and sex selection, water law, trafficking, and rights-based lawyering. She has also served as a consultant to the UN organization Drugs and Crime and has been a part of the expert group on trafficking cases database on the UNODC Vienna. She has served on the board, advisory committees, working groups, drafting committees, etc. of several non-governmental organizations, universities, and governmental bodies, including the Steering Committee of the Planning Commission of India, National Advisory Council, and National Commission for Women. Dr. Sarasu has authored several books, articles, and research papers on different areas of human rights and family law, and has presented papers at national and international conferences on her areas of interest. In addition to her research and teaching commitments, she coordinates the Center for Women and Law and Human Rights Learning Project. She is the chief editor of the National Law School Journal and March of the Law. Once again, a heartiest welcome to you, ma'am. So we are honored by your presence in this today's session. Now we shall start our technical session. The platform is all yours, ma'am.
Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your kind invitation, and I'm very happy to be here with everyone. I understand that. First of all, let me ask if there is any difficulty in hearing me, or am I audible?
You are audible, ma'am. Everything is fine.
All right. Thank you. So, well, when I heard about the program and I was asked to speak on trafficking, and I realized that that was a special focus of this program, I thought I would start with some basics, because it is an area which is, of course, an area which receives a lot of attention, but it is also an area, unfortunately, that there is a lot of controversy with. And as people who are part of the legal fraternity, I mean, it is our duty to try and understand, a legal problem in a multidisciplinary way and try to figure out which the best possible interpretation is and what the best possible way forward for us would be. Now, I understand also that the session is very short. It is a 1-hour session. And it is impossible to go through all the different provisions on trafficking law, but you do have specific speakers who are going to be dealing with certain key areas like the POCSO, so I'm not going to be dealing with it. But what I'd like to think about for some time is, where do we really situate trafficking in this entire realm of law? How do we as lawyers approach trafficking? And when we look at, I mean, if you just do a Google search of trafficking, you will find that there are many people who are working on trafficking, many groups, but very few lawyers. So the legal profession has not really addressed the issue of trafficking to an extremely large extent. So I have a short PPT which I will share with you, but I will be moving back and forth from the PPT and the presentation. So I hope this is visible to everyone. If it isn't, please let me know. To understand trafficking, first of all, is the screen visible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So first of all, to understand trafficking, we first need to understand the difference between sex and gender. And this is something that is relevant whenever we are discussing issues dealing with gender on any platform. And unfortunately, when we study law, we are never exposed to this difference. So the question we need to begin with is, of course, the difference between the terms sex and gender, and whether gender is a men versus women kind of an issue. Now, frankly speaking, the difference is very simple. And it is usually taught in courses like sociology, where we learn that sex is biological and gender is something that is constructed by society or created by society. To give you one example, if you're saying something is biological, if I make a statement that women give birth to babies, yes, that is biological. So you're talking about the sex. Only a woman can give birth to babies. A man cannot. However, if I make a statement that men are good at mathematics and women are bad at maths, then it is something that is constructed, it is created, it is not real, it is not borne out by fact. And that is the difference that we need to keep in mind when we are looking at law. We do see also that society has created gender stereotypes for each sex. For instance, for a long time, even our profession, law, was not open to women. And it took a woman from, I think, Calcutta, who, challenged this for the first time, because it was felt that law is very tough. Women can't be in this profession. And this is, of course, not, the difference is not because of being a woman, but because how we see a woman's role, or how we see a woman's strengths and weaknesses, and how we see men's strengths. So this is creating a stereotype for each sex. We are saying that women are like this and men are like this, not because of their biology, but because of the way that society has viewed them. And we also see that there are many new terms which we may be familiar with, like transgenders, a gender reassignment surgery, where a biological sex, you would change yourself from one to another, and so on. But the to keep in mind is that this gender stereotyping is very, very real. Okay. Now, when we look at India, we see that the Constitution is at the basis of all our laws. And we see that the Constitution creates a model of not just equality, but also affirmative action. So women should not just be treated with equality, but must also be treated, you can have special provisions for women. This is also true, we know, for children. And the basis of our constitution is equality, non-discrimination, and dignity. And this is something which is relevant for men and women, of course, but very relevant as far as women are concerned. Now, when we look at how trafficking is treated in law, we see that trafficking law is divided into very many different parts, and it is found in different statutes, found scattered across different laws. Now, how has trafficking law changed over time? First of all, it has moved from punishing a victim and moved to punishing an person who's exploiting. And now it has moved to punishing only those who are exploiting. And here we need to spend some time to understand how this law has changed. And certainly it is relevant for us to understand the change in the way that the law has moved, because it also included a change in the way we view women. Now, however much we say, yes, we understand that sex is biological and that gender is something constructed by society, we do not understand how it affects our individual lives. And to take one example which is relevant to trafficking would be to look at it from a perspective of labor legislation. All right. Now, and of course, the Constitution, to start with the Constitution, I should have looked at it in that order. To start with the Constitution, very often we say that, women, you can have special provisions for women. And this is always raised as an issue by those who fight for men's rights, okay? Whatever their justifications may be, to say that, oh, but the Constitution talks about equality. How can you give women better rights? But we need to remember that the model of the Constitution that we have is not one of notional equality or nominal equality. You say you're equal and leave it at that. The framework of our Constitution is what we call real equality. Is there actually equality in society? If it is not there, you have to take affirmative action to make sure that equality is reached. Earlier, to give you an example, in the labor law framework, anywhere in the world, there was no such thing as maternity leave. Why? Because being pregnant was not being sick. And they said, oh, women can choose to have a child or not have a child. But they did not look at it from what we call a gender perspective, to understand that, well, men don't get pregnant, women do. But pregnancy is an important social function. It is needed for the woman herself. It is also needed for the child she is having. So if you want to protect rights of women, if you want to protect rights of children, you need to give leave for the woman when she is pregnant. You need to give her maternity leave, you need to give her benefits, you need to give her nutrition, and so on and so forth. This a way that we look at law earlier used to be completely from a male perspective. When you start looking at it from a female perspective, then things change. This is also true when you're looking at children, because we keep thinking of children as people who do not have rights. So we believe that they are owned by parents and parents can do whatever they want with them. But that is not true, because the Constitution says every citizen of India and every child is a citizen of India. So we keep saying, oh, no, children don't have these rights, women don't have these rights. That is wrong. A constitution gives all women, all children the same rights as they do give anyone else. But when we look at issues of women's rights and children's rights, we tend to look at them as lesser citizens. So if one man beats up another man on the road, he would file an FIR and say, this person should be punished, he has beaten me. But about 60% of women face domestic violence at home. Not even 1% complains. Because it's as, oh, man has a right to beat his wife. If he's a good man, he won't beat. But if he does beat, and the woman goes and complains about a crime to a police station, she is breaking up the family. So the way that we have ourselves seen women and seen children as people who don't have rights leads to them being exploited. So all exploitation of women and children is not trafficking. But because we have gendered stereotypes, and we have stereotypes based on age, that, the older you are, the more you have to be respected. And if you're a child, you do not be respected. And I can beat up a child. Once you have that in our minds as a society, that we think of exploitation as women and children as normal, then it makes it easier for them to be commercially exploited, which is trafficking. So there is a clear link between the way we see women and children, the way we see exploitation as natural, and that exploitation then taking a commercial angle, which is trafficking. We see nothing wrong, for instance, with the way that our mothers work 24/7, 7 days a week without a single day's vacation. We don't see that as exploitative. When we have holidays, we expect to eat good food. Who makes that good food? Our mothers. But we never see that as an exploitation. But she works without a salary for so many days, her entire life, and does not get holidays. In such a case, we know that if such a thing happens between an employer and an employee, that would be slavery. But when it happens in the context of the domestic sphere, the private sphere, it is not considered slavery. And because, there are many societies which do recognize the contribution of a housewife. For instance, in a motor vehicle accident, even in India, if a housewife dies or a homemaker dies, then the compensation is paid. But when we look at the way our courts behave, our laws behave, we don't give any right to the woman to her own matrimonial home. We don't give any payment to the woman when she wants to get out of the marriage. We don't give her any support. So these ideas that we have in our mind, that it's okay to exploit women, it's okay to exploit children, has led to a situation where we have this huge problem of trafficking in our country. Now, when I started off with looking at how trafficking was treated in law, we see that first of all, all trafficking law started off by looking at what the action was. Okay. Now, I don't have time to look at all forms of trafficking, so I'm going to focus on one controversial one, which is sex trafficking, because I do see that you have other sessions specifically dealing with POCSO and other areas of child rights. Now, when we look at sex trafficking, first of all, we need to understand how people view sex. So to go back to the issues of gender, when we look at how sex is treated, is sex different for men and is it different for women? We see that because we live in a patriarchal society where greater rights are given to men, we see that sex is also being defined from a male perspective. So if a man has sex with multiple women, we say, oh, he's a stud, he has so many girlfriends. It's a thing to be admired. If a woman has sex with multiple partners, we say, oh, she's a loose woman. She's a slut. She's a prostitute. Okay. So even the act of sexual intercourse is often not seen as something that is mutually enjoyable, where there's mutual enjoyment, but something that a woman gives and a man takes. Okay. This is true even in the context of a marriage. And you have statements made that a man has a right to have sexual intercourse with her husband, his wife. But we never see a woman having a right to have sexual intercourse, or that the husband should keep his wife happy, sexually and in other ways as well. So this idea of a man taking sex and a woman giving sex has also led to notions that men are sexual beings and women are passive beings. Women have no sexual needs. Which, with an understanding now of gender, we understand that, of course, women do have sexual needs. And in a marital relationship, if men and women are both not happy and both are equal partners, then the woman is going to be unhappy. She may not stay with that husband. So when we look at sex work, we see that when if men did, since men were powerful, it's patriarchal society. They could have sex, forcefully also with their wives. And even now, we don't recognize marital rape as a crime, but it would be cruelty, which is a ground for divorce. We do see that, if a man, did not want to have sexual intercourse with his wife, or when his wife attained menopause, she was seen as not fit to have sex with, because sex was seen from a male perspective. So it was considered all right for a man to have other sexual partners. So we have in our own traditions, we have examples of men being bigamous, having multiple wives, or men having concubines or mistresses, and that was considered normal. And men also going to others for sexual services. And there would be women who gave these sexual services to men for a payment. Now, because giving sex by a woman is seen as bad, sex work was considered to be bad. Oh, these women, they are not attached to men. They are loose women running around without men controlling them. And they're giving sexual services to men for payment. So they were seen as evil women or bad women or women doing something wrong. So though the act of sexual intercourse by itself is not wrong, though the act of sexual intercourse with consent is not wrong, why should sexual intercourse with consent done decently with the woman's full consent be considered to be wrong? It should not be considered to be wrong, but initial cases, because a woman's sexuality was very clearly controlled in also many societies other than matrilineal societies. If she had sex outside marriage, she was punished, and sex workers were punished. So initial laws which dealt with sex work, which were made by the British, who had very clear notions of what was right and wrong, punished the sex worker. So if you did sex work, you're punished. That's it. It was suppression of immoral traffic, Now, when it was understood that women who are in sex work do it for an income, and they are doing it to be able to earn a livelihood, then with some understanding from a woman's perspective, the law changed to some extent. So mere sex work under the Immoral Traffic Prevention Act, the ITPA, was not punished, but the exploitation was punished. So if I forced another woman to have sex work and made money from her sex work, then I would be penalized. Okay, because I can't force anyone to do work which they do not want to do for money. Okay, so whether I'm forcing a woman or I'm forcing a child, that would be considered to be exploitation. So an ideal law which deals with sex work should not penalize sex work, it should penalize the exploitation. So that is the difference. When we are looking at it from a constitutional law and a labor law framework, sex work is not indecent work. It is decent work. It's good work. However, we must keep in mind that because of the way that we view sex, we view sex as something which is bad for a woman to do. Because of our gendered notions of sex, sex work suddenly becomes bad work. All right? And trafficking, therefore, gets these connotations. And some things which should be trafficking are not trafficking. Is if somebody is paying someone less than minimum wages, why are we saying, oh, that person is violating the Minimum Wages Act? No, that person is trafficking because you are not paying decent wages. You are treating that person almost as a slave because you're not paying the person what the person is entitled to get. If you're not giving equal rights to a woman, to her matrimonial home and a matrimonial property, you are not recognizing the years of free labor she has performed. That is trafficking. So unfortunately, because we still look at trafficking from a male perspective, we look at it from a moralistic perspective, things which should be considered to be exploitative, like the role of a housewife, are not considered exploitative. And things which are not exploitative, like a woman who's an independent woman, who's soliciting in a public place to try to get a livelihood, she is considered to be a criminal. Okay. And even if she's not considered to be a criminal, we have moved towards what is called the Swedish model, where the sex worker may not be penalized, but the people who go to her for sex work will be penalized. That also is affecting a woman's right to labor, because if you penalize something, then, one, either men will stop going to sex workers, in which case her ability to attain livelihood will come down. And especially in this time of in the Corona times, this is one group of people who can't ply that trade and they are suffering. We also see that even where they do, if it is illegal, then it will go underground. So the man will ask her to meet him in a very private place, which may be dangerous for the sex worker. He may have sex with her and refuse to pay her. He may do acts with her which she has not agreed to. Her life is at risk. Her safety is at risk. So the best way is to remove barriers in what should ideally be considered to be work. Removal of barriers, and at the same time, prevent exploitation. The person who should be protected in all this is the person who's doing the work, the sex worker, more than anyone else. So remove barriers to sex work, but, make sure that she is not exploited. So that is how we should be tackling this issue. Instead, what have we done? Instead, what we have done is that we have gone back a long way, and sex work is not recognized as decent work. And we are not listening to sex workers themselves. Sex workers are well unionized over the country. Many of them have community-based organizations. Many of them have organizations which run into lakhs of members. Okay? And they say, recognize our work as work. If you can recognize the alcohol industry as work, why not? I can't understand where individuals are saying recognize our work as work is not taken into account. But in the drafting of the law, in law reform, these women were never considered. They never had a voice. These big organizations of sex workers and collectives of sex workers were never consulted when the law was changed. So the concerns that we still have in law with regard to trafficking are these. One is, we do not recognize sex work as decent work, and that should be recognized. Secondly, many forms of exploitation are not seen as trafficking. Payment of minimum wages, for instance, is not seen as trafficking. Free service which is required of some people is not seen as trafficking. And this is true also of the legal profession. Many seniors really exploit their juniors in practice. And I don't see why that is not being taken up as a serious issue by the profession. Thirdly, we see that a number of trafficking laws have been taken up to address non-trafficking matters. This could be either, let us say, a woman has consented to something like in a massage parlor, for instance, she's consented, she's doing it. The clients there are booked for trafficking. We also see that many cases where there is sexual abuse, either of women or of children, that is treated as trafficking. Now, that can't be trafficking. There are separate laws dealing with sexual abuse, or right from sexual harassment to rape or POCSO. Trafficking is relevant only when there is an economic angle, when there is exploitation of one person by another. Now, a client is not exploiting a sex worker. If he's paying her what has been agreed to, it's not exploitation. If he's not harming her, it is not exploitation. But somebody who forces people to do labor, including domestic work at less than minimum wages, which is set by that particular state, if there is a law, would be a trafficker because you're exploiting that person's labor. So the last point is what is most troubling, which is populism versus statistics. Now, when we look at the statistics of trafficking, someone said there are lies, damn lies, and statistics. That is so true with regard to trafficking. If you look at how many people have been rescued, organizations say we rescued so many, we rescued so many. Then you look at all the organizations put together, they're working together. So they've only rescued so many people. Many of these people don't want to be rescued. They're adult women who are just trying to do their job. We also see that, people do a lot of loose talk in India, especially with regard to trafficking. They'll say, oh, there is a lot of organ trafficking. That's not true. There may be a few cases. There is a lot of exploitation for donation of human organs. If you look at who are the people who are the biggest donors of organs, you will find that 90% of them are women. If you say that, well, it can only be within the same family, well, there are people who, instead of a dowry, are taking a woman's organ. But saying that, oh, there are so many cases where children are trafficked for camel racing. I mean, in India, we don't even have camel racing. Even if they're taken abroad, how many children are taken? There's no clear data, but people make loose talk. They say people are trafficked for adoption. Where is the data? So we are creating this book, what they call fake news. This, entire thing about what is trafficking. Oh, so many women are being forced into prostitution. No, the bulk of them are there voluntarily. They are not trafficked. So we must be very clear when we call something trafficking and exploitation, there must be trafficking and commercial exploitation. That is the problem. And that is something which our entire legal system of trafficking, people who are writing about trafficking, they are not able to make this difference. Partly because they may not understand, they were not lawyers, and partly because a lot of the trafficking discourse in India is driven by funding. So you're saying what the funder wants you to say, which is doing harm to people who are trying to earn a living. And this is a very tenuous area in the sense that a woman who's a sex worker may not be only doing sex work. In the morning, she may be doing domestic work in her house. In the evening, she may be doing sex work. She may be doing some labor here and there. So people do multiple things labor does multiple things in order to earn a living. And we must not, give a barrier where that is concerned. Now, let us quickly try and understand how the law has defined trafficking. This is something which has been critiqued very heavily in many writings, and you can read about the critiques as well. We do know that the IPC does cover many areas of trafficking, which includes not just sex trafficking, but also trafficking for any other reason, including, for instance, unlawful compulsory labor. We see also that when we look at the IPC, which has a definition for trafficking, it uses broadly the definition which is used in other international documents, and it covers things from when you look at the first phrase that is used, it clearly says, whoever for the purpose of exploitation. Very, very clear. Recruits, transports, harbors, transfers, receives a person or persons by using threat, using force, by abduction, practicing fraud, by abuse of power, etc., commits the offense of trafficking. Till here, there are no problems. But the second part of it is a little problematic. I'm sorry, I think I have jumped a bit. I think I accidentally deleted the slide or moved it. Let me see if I moved it somewhere. Okay, here it is. Second part of it says, expression exploitation shall include any act of physical exploitation, etc., etc. We can understand that. But the second explanation is problematic. It says, the consent of the victim is immaterial in determination of the offense of trafficking. So what does this explanation do? This explanation changes things. This explanation says, we take away agency from you. You don't know what's good for yourself. You may be an adult, you may be a 40-year-old woman, but we are saying what is best for you. So if you are deciding to be in sex work on your own, we can penalize you. That is how it's being read. But in my opinion, that is not how it should be read. Okay, if a victim is being exploited, then what does exploitation mean? It means that I am not getting much for my labor. I'm not getting fair wages for my labor. Someone else is getting the bulk of it. That is exploitation. But if I want to work in a particular livelihood on my own, and the other person may be getting a cut, but it's not exploitative, then it cannot fall within the realm of exploitation. Okay? So a woman who's choosing to do sex work is not a victim. Okay? So we create our own victims. We are saying that these people are victims. We sometimes refuse to understand who a victim is. And here there is a huge gendered notion. On the one hand, if a woman is slapped by her husband and she goes to court, sometimes the courts have said, so what, he's taking good care of you. Why are you making such a fuss if you get 1 or 2 slaps? So courts refuse to see women as victims. On the other hand, the court is also denying a woman agency. Let us say, and there have been many cases which you are familiar with also, where an adult woman decides, I want to marry this man. Okay, there was one case from the Punjab and Haryana High Court, where an adult woman wanted to marry a man. She went away from home. She was about 22 years old. She went away and married a man of her choice. When the matter came before court, which it shouldn't have gone to court in the first place, the court said there must be something mentally wrong with her. If she has gone against her parents' wishes, let her go and stay in a mental asylum for 2 weeks. This is ridiculous. It does not recognize the agency of the woman. This old Manusmriti thing that the woman should be under, in infancy, she should be under the care of her husband. On marriage, she should be under the care of infancy, she should be under the care of her father. On marriage, she should be under the care of her husband. And after that, under the care of her son. This is a philosophy which is affecting us, saying that the woman is always under the care of a man. She's not capable of acting on her own. She doesn't know what she's doing. We know what is best for her. We think she should not be doing this. And if she's doing sex work, then it is exploitation. Then she's a victim. We don't say if she's doing domestic work, she's a victim. Why? All of us have domestic workers at home. Because that is something that the middle class wants. We all want domestic workers. But as domestic workers, they may be being paid less than what she would make in sex work. Domestic workers, if something is missing, she breaks one glass, people may cut her wages. In this time of Corona, many people are not paying their domestic workers. So is that not exploitation? So how is it that some things we are happy to see as victimization and exploitation, and other things we are not? And we are not recognizing the agency of a woman, which means that I am my own agent. You cannot act as my agent without my consent. The very basic principle of agency in contract law, that the principal has the right to determine who the agent should be. The principal is their own agent unless they have passed on that agency to someone else. So this looking at a woman as an agent, as someone who's capable of taking decisions on behalf of herself, is something that this law is lacking. And that is extremely problematic from a gendered point of view. Okay? So that is really the difficulty with trafficking law, that when women are being exploited, if they are in labor, which is something which we don't see as immoral, like if she's being exploited for domestic work, if she is being exploited in a field, working on the fields, we never call her a farmer. She's always a farmer's wife who works for free. We don't really give them much, a benefit. But when she's working on her own at a job that we consider indecent, then we start, jumping up and saying, oh, she should not be allowed to do this. Let me just go back for a couple of minutes to the slides that I have and go through a few more important points. Now, a lot of the way that we see trafficking has come from the UN definitions on trafficking. And we need to keep in mind that these definitions have come in with consensus from all over the world, but many countries which have signed these conventions still recognize sex work as decent work. And as I said, we need to also look at what sex workers themselves feel. In the International Union of Sex Workers, campaigns for human, civil, and labor rights of those who work in the sex industry. Now, why are these three rights mentioned? And when you look at the points further on, we will understand why these three are mentioned. Okay? It recognizes sex workers as work, and it says all workers, including sex workers, have the right to full protection of all existing laws, regardless of the context and without discrimination. These include all laws relating to harassment, violence, threats, intimidation, health, safety, and theft. Now, how does this work? It means that because sex workers work, if a sex worker has entered into a contract with a person to provide services, that person cannot go away and say, I will not pay you. Now, as law students, one of the first subjects that we study is contracts law. In contract law, we study that a contract, an agreement which is against law or against public policy would be a void agreement. Okay, it would not be a valid contract. Now, where does sex work fit in? When I studied contract law in 1990, a long time ago, 1990, we learned that we took a case which was in England at that point of time, where a woman had engaged in sexual services, a man had engaged a woman for sexual services and refused to pay her. And she had gone to court, and the court said, because it is for an immoral purpose, you cannot be paid. This is work. She should be paid. Okay, and that's what the International Union says, that sex work should be recognized as work and given all the protection of work. So if a woman enters into an agreement for sex work, the man can't say, I will not pay you. If a woman agrees to sexual intercourse once, or sexual intercourse with a condom once, and the man has forcible sexual intercourse without a condom, it is a rape. So laws which earlier used to say that character of a victim was relevant in rape, we know has been thrown out. Why? because we know it had so many barriers in cases of women being able to get a conviction on rape. The man would turn around and say, you are of bad character. So what we're saying is two things. One, sex workers work, a sex worker is of good character. Okay, and therefore she can claim protection where she has suffered violence or she has suffered rape. Luckily, there are a few good decisions from our courts, including the Supreme Court, which have recognized these rights that sex workers have, that they have basic citizenship rights that anyone else has. They're as much citizens as you and I would be. So, of course, the protection of all laws should be available to them. The second point that they address is that they should be able to access the full range of employment, contract, and property laws. I think I've already dealt with contract, but property laws as well, that they should be able to open bank accounts. They should be able to, have their own property and so on. And we see that when we look at sex work, some of the laws that have come in are because of British influence. Now, for a long time, even before the British came, there were the dancing women who used to dance, who were called the Nach girls. Now, these Nach girls, the way that they passed on property was that they would adopt daughters, and these adopted daughters would inherit their property. All right. So, in the case of Nach girls, once the British started saying, oh, this is immoral, all over the country, people started questioning the right of these daughters to inherit. They said, Nach girls should not be allowed to adopt daughters. Okay, it is immoral. They are an immoral profession. They are making these children also join that immoral profession. And so all these adoptions should be considered void. So what happened as a result of this law? As a result of this law, two things happened. One is these adoptions that were made by these Nach girls of children was considered not a valid adoption, which meant that this child who is now 40 or 50 years old is not the valid, properly adopted child of this woman. What does it mean? It means she does not get her property. So after 40 years, when this woman has died and she can't give the property to the doctor, you're saying, oh, you were not properly adopted because your adoption was by a Nach girl. So one, it is penalizing a person, a child who was adopted a long time back and not giving her property. That who does this property go to? It goes to the Nach girl's family, which exploited her in the first place by forcing her to become a Nach girl. That is the difference. So when the decision was made on morality, oh, we don't recognize Nach girls, we don't recognize this adoption, who was being penalized? The child who was adopted, who has probably supported her mother when the mother was old, and who is gaining? The people who were the exploiters in the first place. So some of these laws, when we are looking at laws which are concerned with immoral acts of women, we must be very clear that when we change a law, we should only protect one person, that is a sex worker. Okay? The last thing that, the last couple of points which are made by the International Union are that they should be able to participate in and leave the sex industry without stigma. What does this mean? If they want to be a sex worker, they should be allowed to be a sex worker. If they don't want to be a sex worker, they should be allowed to leave. And the stigma of being a sex worker should not attach to them, meaning that the state should not discriminate against her just because she was a sex worker. And people should not look down at her, treat her badly because she's a sex worker. Like, for instance, they should not prevent her from enrolling her children in a school and so on. But because the stigma is so ingrained in society that when women engage in sex work, their families do not know under most cases that she is in sex work. And in some states, they started giving passes for sex workers, which I think is so problematic. I don't need a pass to say I'm a teacher. Why would a sex worker need a pass? Then they can be blackmailed. So people who are giving the passes and know of a passes say, oh, you better give me money. Otherwise, I'll go tell your family what you're doing. So that right to privacy about what one is doing should be available to everyone. Okay. The last point that the IAU, the International Union, makes is that, sorry, I forgot to mention the participate in and leave the sex industry. Okay, I mentioned that. Is full and voluntary access to non-discriminatory health checks and medical advice. Now, this is very important for us because very often we see that the burden of health is borne by the women. Even in terms of in a family, a large percentage of women in India are anemic, but it's not really taken very seriously. It can simply be helped by iron supplements. And that's not something that, the state really focuses on. So woman is taken care of when she's pregnant, and after that, nobody really bothers about her. Now, when we look at health also, the unfair burden is on the woman. Okay, if a child is unhealthy, woman is a caretaker. An elderly person is unhealthy, the woman is a caretaker. If the woman is unhealthy herself, she is her own caretaker. We also see that in issues like family planning, the focus is on the woman. Although condoms are easier, they don't have any side effects on women, and it's cheaply available. It does not affect, it does not involve medical intervention. Very often that is not the preferred way that contraception is used. Women are forced to take pills, or women are forced to take injections, which have long-term health repercussions on women, which we are now facing with middle-aged women having all kinds of problems and health issues as they grow older. Okay. Similarly, when you're looking at public health issues like HIV, women face the heaviest brunt, especially sex workers. So they are seen as the people who are spreading HIV, which is not true. If they are allowed to have safe sex and the people have safe sex with them, then HIV would not spread. But the burden of the healthcare system, and the initial days of HIV, sex workers were just rounded up. They were compulsorily tested without their permission. Things that could not happen to you and me. Nobody can draw our blood without our permission. But it was routinely done to sex workers. And even now, they face the brunt of health-related issues. And that is something that the international IUSW says, that you must have voluntary access to non-discriminatory health checks and medical services. So when we look at our own country and we see the All India network of sex workers, etc., we also see that, this is compiled by some, very many sex worker organizations which come together. They very clearly lay down certain factors that sex workers' rights need to be recognized as human rights. Sex work needs to be separated from sex trade and trafficking, which is exploitative. Laws and policies directly or indirectly criminalizing sex work needs to be expunged. For instance, explanation 2 of the trafficking law must be clarified that it does not affect voluntary labor. And an enabling legal environment for sex workers needs to be guaranteed. Sex work is work and needs to be recognized as a form of labor. Sex workers' rights to social entitlements and benefits should be ensured. Okay, sorry, I think I hadn't presented that. I just leave that slide there for a bit. So this is what they say. So sex work is work and must be recognized as a form of labor. So when we are talking about anti-trafficking, very clearly anti-trafficking means that we must not allow for exploitation. Whether such an act is considered to be trafficking in popular imagination or not considered to be trafficking, such as exploitation of domestic work, these must be considered trafficking. And domestic workers are entitled to minimum wages. All workers are entitled to minimum wages. And all work must be seen as decent work, of course, subject to the young age of children. I'm dealing with adult women here. Please be very careful. I'm not dealing with children. Okay. Children, of course, have to be specially protected. And until the age of 18, there is no question of a child being in sex work. Okay. And there's no child is part of any sex work collective. They're very clear that they don't allow children to be in sex work. All right. But for adult women, that's a different story altogether. So we need to make this difference between trafficking, which is exploiting someone else, and decent work, which is people who are doing whatever work they can to survive, whether it is sex work or domestic work or manual scavenging or any other kinds of work which are sometimes not seen as decent enough. So we need to go back to the beginning of what I had shared. We need to first be aware that there's a difference between sex and gender, that gender stereotypes affect the way that we look at trafficking and exploitation, and that we must always ask the woman question. What does the woman in this situation want? And we must try to protect her interests. If we are not doing that, we are not just violating women's rights, but we are also violating the spirit of the Constitution. Because as far as the Constitution is concerned, women and even children are equal citizens of our country. Okay. Thank you so much for your patient hearing. I am now open for questions.
Thank you, ma'am, for enlightening us on the topic of trafficking, and also providing a core concept relating to the various problems of women and children in present context. So, there are some questions in the chat box.
Sure.
May I have the permission to take the questions, ma'am?
I can see the questions also.
Okay. Okay, ma'am.
I can quickly address those. There's a question from Vijay saying that there's increased violence during lockdown than normal days. That is true, because the husbands are not going to work. They are working from home. Okay, so when husbands go to work, if it is an abusive husband, it's not that a good person is suddenly turning violent. No. If the husband is a person who's anyway a wife abuser, if he beats his wife, then at least when he goes to office, the wife has peace of mind at home. But now, because many people are working from home, it means that the wife is stuck with her abuser day in and day out. That is the reason why domestic violence cases are rising. Also, the normal mechanisms that are available, like you complain and the protection officer comes and files an incident report. These normal mechanisms are not working. So the remedies that are available in other times, even for the few women who use the remedies, is not available. So that is the challenge. Okay. There are a couple of other questions as well.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I can see them. One question is on.
Another question is, why are marital rape not considered as crime?
It should be considered. There's no reason why. It's because of our patriarchal views that a man has a right to have sex with his wife whenever he wants. Okay, even if the wife does not want it. And the fact that a man is seen as taking sex and a woman giving it sex. The woman is not seen as an equal partner who should enjoy sexual intercourse. Okay. There are a couple of questions. Yeah, sorry.
Next question is, ma'am, from Dipti Sikha. She is asking what woman can do if nothing like properties or any single thing is not her name, even she is not just like servant to them and doing all her work as a daughter-in-law, wife, even they try to harass her and take all the freedom from her.
This is true. So we should not leave women in such a bad economic position. So she should get equal share of property from her parents, but also she should have a right to matrimonial property and matrimonial home. So if we allow that, under the DV Act, technically she can ask to leave and stay in the house. But very often courts are not sensitive to these needs. They ask her to adjust and stay. So that is the problem. One, we must not expect a woman to fight for her rights. If I am beating up my daughter, I can't ask this daughter to beat me back, right? So putting the burden on himself or herself is not right for us to do. So the law must actually help her by having better laws dealing with matrimonial property, by having more stringent provisions which allow her to stay in the home, even if the house belongs to her husband or to anyone else. Someone has asked if prostitution of minor girl is sexual exploitation or sexual abuse. It would be both. It would be definitely sexual exploitation because the person is making money, so it is trafficking. But it would fall under POCSO, several provisions of POCSO, which carry higher punishment. And I will ask you to wait for the session on POCSO, which you are having, which will deal with this. There's another question, statement, legalization of prostitution can protect women, of course. But the thing is that prostitution is something like smoking or drinking. Is it legal or illegal? The law doesn't have anything on it. So only if the law says it is illegal, it becomes. So one is, the law should not make it illegal and should not make it exploitative. Should not permit exploitation. Otherwise, everything is legal. So this legalization of prostitution is a wrong statement. We should not criminalize prostitution. And where it has been criminalized, it must be, sex work should be decriminalized. Exploitation should continue to remain criminalized. You've said that trafficking is on the rise. You're right. But the bulk of trafficking that is on the rise is labor trafficking, not sex work. Like not paying people minimum wages is on the rise. And there is also a move by governments. I know the UP government wants to do away with minimum wages. My God, that is so dangerous. That means just saying that anyone can hire anyone for anything. It is almost like slavery. Okay, so doing away with minimum wages is extremely dangerous. And the world may consider it as trafficking, even if we don't. I don't think that increasing the punishment increases someone has mentioned POCSO and punishment. I don't think the punishment should be increased. Keep a low punishment, but get more convictions is what I would say. And don't focus so much on convictions. If you look at POCSO, the bulk of cases which come under POCSO are not trafficking and they are not child sexual abuse. The bulk of cases which come under POCSO are where two children voluntarily have sexual intercourse. Like a 17-year-old girl and a 17-year-old boy, they run away and they get married and they have sexual intercourse. So those things I don't think should come under POCSO. Unfortunately, it does. POCSO also works on the basis that children never have sex, which is not true. If you look at our national family health statistics, we see that about 40% of girls, a little more than that, get married before the age of 17. All these girls are having sex, but you can't make this 40% of men punishable under POCSO. So POCSO needs to be more nuanced, keeping in mind the realities of our country. I'm not favoring child marriage. I'm saying that's a fact of life. And we need to take a different view of it. So the people who are abusing children or trafficking in children are not the main people who are being punished under POCSO, okay, is what we need to keep in mind. Does domestic violence happen in the case of transgender and in bisexual relations? Yes, it also happens in gay relationship among two gays or two lesbians. Wherever there is a power equation, where one exploits the other, there could definitely be a situation of domestic violence. All right. Can you give us your slide presentation? Yeah, I'm happy to share my slides with you. No problem. legitimacy of children of prostitutes should be considered. Kindly share your opinion. See, we are not, it's not that the child's or the parents who make the child legitimate or illegitimate. Every child is born legitimate. The law makes the child illegitimate. And in my opinion, if you consider the child an equal citizen of the country, you look at the UN Convention on Rights of the Child, the very concept of illegitimacy should be done away with. To the extent it has, for instance, under CRPC, that every child, whether legitimate or illegitimate, can claim maintenance. But every child should also have equal rights to the parents' property. So we have created this concept of illegitimate children. And that must certainly be done away with. I completely agree with you, Advocate Pooja. How to educate people on social guidance because of ego and socially irresponsible behavior. Education is important, no doubt about it. But there are extremely educated men who are extremely narrow-minded. And domestic violence is a common phenomenon, whether it is an uneducated person or extremely literate, high-income society. So where we are failing is not education. Where we are failing is, breaking down patriarchy. Patriarchy will continue to exist where men have a privileged position in the family. Patriarchy will continue to exist where, we say that the father is the head of the family, where a child sees the father beating the mother, where we tell the boy if he does something naughty, it's okay, boys are supposed to be naughty, but girls have to behave themselves. So until that happens, we are encouraging this. And frankly speaking, I don't think it should be my burden or your burden to sensitize the whole world. It's people's own burden to be better sensitized. So sometimes when men make, I remember in one case, I was with my colleagues and, we had some visitors from somewhere else. And one man made extremely horrible statements. So all my colleagues turned to me and said, Sarasu, why aren't you saying anything? So I said very, very loudly, I said, it is my responsibility to educate my students and to talk to people in seminars and conferences who have come to listen to me. But if any random man wants to be an idiot and not want to educate themselves, that is their problem, not mine. Okay? So the man, of course, heard it and then he kept quiet. But it's not our burden to educate the whole world. Men should get educated on their own. Otherwise, they'll become dinosaurs. I mean, if we did not move to new technology, like Google Meet to have this conference, if your college did not take that initiative, this webinar would never have happened. We would say, oh, let us wait for Corona pandemic to get over, and then we will have this webinar and call people from here. You're changed with the times. So if men are not willing to change for the times, then that's going to be, an issue. Okay, Manjeet, I've already answered your question, so I'm not going to go over that again. I can see, yes, Dr. Harish, please go ahead. I can see you waving.
Yeah, I just came in. I was busy with some other thing. Okay, two things I have. I have an excellent presentation. I compliment you for that. At an informative session. One is how effective has been the Bachpan and Bachao Andolan. One, then role of media in combating trafficking.
Yeah, I see Bachpan Bachao Andolan works with children. So obviously a child should not be in sex work. But how effective they are, I can't say, because a lot of these organizations are focusing on what we call the model of crime and punishment. Okay. Now, the model of crime and punishment has certain problems. What you're doing is you're trying to say, let us catch these traffickers and put them in prison. But the bulk of people who are trafficking the child, who are these people? Where does the trafficking start? It starts with the family. And because they don't understand this, there are cases where, for instance, an organization rescued a group of Nepali children from Mumbai, took them back to Nepal, took them back to their families. In 2 months, the children were all back. So who is the person who's actually sending the children here? It is a family.
Parents.
The parents. So we have certain presumptions that children are safest with their parents. Let us send them back to the parents. When a girl runs away from home to marry her boyfriend, why is she running away from home? Because probably the parents are forcing her to marry someone else whom she doesn't want to marry. And then what do? We put this boy in jail and we send the girl back to her parents where they might torture her or kill her, honor killing.
Most of the time,
Okay, so we don't
in Bangalore, it so happened few years back in Jayanagar, a father came with his 2 daughters and left them in the park and told them he'll go fetch some eatables and did not return at all. And he left them and went away. Okay, because he didn't know how to take care of his daughters after his wife died. Parents are themselves involving themselves in this trafficking and making money also, and even the child doesn't get the money. In Gujarat cotton ginning mills, a lot of child laborers never knew what they were being paid. I have a video of that on the national TV. This was in this, we used to say this happens even in Modi's vibrant Gujarat. They didn't know what they are being paid also. Media did a sting operation.
So that's what I said.
Media did a sting operation.
Absolutely, yeah. So, I mean, all these organizations, it's all very well, but, they are working on the angle that, the trafficker is some wicked person living in Mumbai. But trafficking starts in the home, and sometimes, parents don't have a choice. If you're looking at child marriage also, I mean, more than 40% of Indian parents feel it's okay for daughters to get married before 18. You can't put all of them in jail. So sometimes the solution, of course, children who are trafficked must be rescued. But where are you going to take them? Then families need to be counseled not to send the children back.
And shelter homes also more crimes. Even in shelter homes, there'll be more crimes.
Yeah, we need to give families alternatives that they can use. Because otherwise, if they don't have money, I mean, they're going to find some way of making money, which might include trafficking the child again. So that's why the crime and punishment model does not work. I'll give you a very sad example, which happens all over the country in bonded labor. When there's bonded labor, people go, organizations go, rescue these bonded laborers and take them back to their homes. And they spend all their money and energy in trying to get a conviction of the person who's running the industry. Like, let us say, a brick kiln. Now, the most important thing, they don't look at it from the worker's angle. What does a bonded labor want? They want their salary. So what happens to the 1 year that they worked and did not get the salary? The organization doesn't work to get their back wages for them. Focus must be on back wages. Otherwise, again, they'll get into some exploitative element. So we are all stuck in this middle class attitude of crime and punishment. We must look at what does the laborer want? What does the woman want? We want to help them. Okay, that is something that we are not being able to do.
Media question.
Media, yeah. I mean, I think all of us choose the media we read. And, where media is concerned, one, they have, though there have been some good articles on things like child marriage or trafficking, etc., they're very responsible for sensationalizing things, when it comes to especially commercial sexual exploitation. And that is where we think we need to be more sensitive to be able to, the media should, labels people as sex worker, etc. I mean, those things should be completely prohibited. Like, even like taking pictures of the person, even if the head is covered, everyone can identify, then their family knows they're in sex work. So then they will be further stigmatized. So we should have definitely better guidelines for media when they discuss this. And sex work should be treated as decent work. But everyone should have a right to privacy on what kind of they are doing.
Thank you.
All right.
Ma'am,
I think
I wanted to share one more thing on the illegitimate child's right to property you were speaking on. Okay, every child, even if it is illegitimate, they will have right. It's only the the mother or due to illicit relationship, even if she claims to be second wife, she may not get right to property. Children will still get the right to property.
Not under all laws. Under Hindu law, yeah, they would get the mother's property, but that's not true of Christian law. It's not true of Shia Muslim law.
Yeah.
So it's not true of Parsi law. So it's not an not
Of
true in
course,
many communities.
personal laws have their own space
Yes,
where
of course.
it differ. But
Yeah.
generally, they have a right to claim at least. They can still make a claim. If they are able to succeed
Yes.
in circumstances basis, they may probably get it.
All right. Let me hand this over to the organizers. I think I have answered all the questions on chat. Thank you all for your comments in person and in chat.
Thank you very much. It was an enlightening session for everybody. God bless you. All the best.
Thank you, ma'am. Before ending of this session, I would like to request Ms. Deepavali Brahma to give a formal vote of thanks to ma'am.
A warm and graceful morning to our most distinguished speaker of the day, Professor Sarasu Esther Thomas, Registrar of National Law School of India, University of Bangalore, and the organizing committee, honorable professors, and District Legal Service Authority of Kokrajhar, respected principal of Kokrajhar Law College, and my dear friends. It's an honor to have been asked to offer a vote of thanks on the occasion of the 3-day national webinar, Rights of Women and Children, Issues and Challenges, organized by District Legal Service Authority Kokrajhar in collaboration with Internal Quality Assurance Cell of Kokrajhar, and also with the media partner latestlaws.com. On behalf of my college and the entire management group here, I am very hearty gratitude to the speaker for sharing his graceful words with us in today's technical session topic on understanding trafficking. And I extend a very hearty vote of thanks to the speaker who spared time from her busy schedule to grace the occasion and sharing with us findings and opinions today. A big thank you to Professor Sarasu Esther Thomas, ma'am, for her efforts for making excellent presentations and meaningful, and also sharing her precious knowledge with all of us. I must mention our deep sense of appreciation for explanation of the topic. I would like to express our sincere thanks to the speaker giving an excellent coverage on understanding trafficking and all the solutions that can be implemented. We are all inspired by your great words, ma'am. I would like to express our profound gratitude to our principal, Ms. Prita Brahma, for her presence in this seminar, for providing encouragement and support, and for taking efforts to make this national level seminar possible, and also promoting with other colleges and universities for participation. I would also like to thank all the professors for encouraging students to participate and also guiding the participants too. I would like to thank the coordinators and organizing committee for making this seminar a great success. This event wouldn't have been successful without the organizing committee chairperson, Shri Vidyut Medi, Assam Judicial Service Government of Assam, Deputy Chairperson, Ms. Kripa Verma, Principal of KLC, Faculty Coordinator, Ms. Duita Sargyari, Assistant Professor, and also IQAC Coordinator of Kokrajhar Law College, Assistant Professor Karanda Warisa, Assistant Professor of KLC, along with DLC Coordinator Shri Narapati Brahma, Paralegal Volunteer of DLC Kokrajhar, and Shri Meenmoy Najori, Accountant DLC Kokrajhar. Finally, all the participants for the active participation in this event, not only from our department, but also from other departments of the college. Thank you so much for your cooperation. Once again, I thank all for your cordial cooperation. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, Deepavali.
Thank you so much,
And
Sarasu.
thank you, Sarasu, ma'am.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Yeah.
Actually,
Thank you,
it is such a pleasant to hear from you on this particular area. Actually, it is really bold of you, ma'am, enlightening us on the sex work and how the sex workers are being trafficked, not only in terms of being sexually exploited or not given that kind of recognition for their profession, but also they are paid minimal in terms of how much ever they are supposed to receive as a wage for their work. And it is very true. And in today's time when everything is going online, women are also asked to do their office work. They are required to do work from home, and at the same time they are also supposed to work at home. And it's some actually the very good of you and very kind of you for touching upon all these matter. And really, and all of us, the men, the fathers, the husbands, the children of the family have to understand and really need to applaud all the women for multitasking. And really
Women are the best multitaskers. We should admit, women are the best multitaskers. We can never match you all. We have to admit.
But forcing them to multitask is also exploitation.
Oh, I know.
I'd rather not multitask.
Homemakers are doing free of service without salary. We are saying they should also be paid.
Yeah. Yes.
They should get a paid holiday also.
Yeah. And also people have to understand that when the domestic help are not, the part-time domestic help, when they are not able to come for this pandemic situation, maybe for the safety purpose or maybe for the lockdown, then people have to understand that they must be paid. At least they are not unable to come for their own personal purpose, but it is because of the pandemic situation existing in the nation. Then it is actually very important for all of us to understand that, to recognize them and to pay the wages and not to cut their wages. All of that we really have to understand, and it be aware to the people actually in the ground level. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
To see you
Bye.
again. Yeah. And participants, will see you again at 1:30 post-lunch session. Thank you. Thank you, one and all.